In this video, we're going to talk about some members of the Bunyaviridae family. We've talked about the Bunyaviridae family before in host defense, host response, and we're going to bring it back. There's over at least 200 different viruses in the Bunyaviridae family. They're an enveloped group of viruses that are associated with two things: rodents and bugs. So arthropods and rodents. So what that tells you is they're all zoonotic. So we're going to discuss kind of the different vectors and and geographic locations behind infections with the Bunyaviridae family, as well as some of the viruses that we've learned before and some that we're going to focus on today. In this video, I'm going to talk about the California encephalitis group of viruses. This is a group within the Bunyaviridae family. Okay, so as I mentioned, you have already talked about the Bunyaviridae family before. Most notably, we talked about sin nombre virus and hantavirus. Both of these cause a significant disease, one in the lungs and one in the kidneys. So hantavirus, or also sometimes known as soul virus, leads to essentially a renal hemorrhagic fever. And that was the one that we talked about that was associated with an outbreak of rats that were imported from out of the country that then led to disease in pet store owners and people who kept these rodents as pets. Sin nombre virus literally translates to the virus without a name. And it was named this because, frankly, nobody wanted it named after their location. Both sin nombre and hantan do not have a vector. They have no arbovirus classification. They have no arthropod association. In this case, you actually contract the virus through inhalation of dried rodent excrement, and they're associated with two places. So hantavirus is largely associated with Asia, and then sin nombre virus is associated with kind of the western US. It was first isolated in an area called the Four Corners area of the United States, where you can actually kind of put one foot and one hand in each corner and you'll be in 4 states at once. Just fun geographical fact. And that causes hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, which we learned about in host defense, host response. All of the viruses in this table are Bunyaviruses. These two have no association with vectors, but the rest of them, the California encephalitis virus group, are all associated with vectors because they are all spread by the Aedes mosquito. The Aedes albopicus or the Aedes aegypti. Because we're in the United States, the albopicus is more common, but aegypti is certainly starting to be a more common presence in our lives. They do also have kind of a normal reservoir in rabbits, squirrels, and field mice. So essentially, a mosquito could bite one of these guys and then go ahead and bite you, and then look at that. Now you have been infected with one of these viruses. So these three we can find all over the continental United States. Jamestown, largely associated with kind of the mid-Atlantic area, but that doesn't mean we can't see it elsewhere. California encephalitis virus, big shock, California. La Crosse is actually named for a town in Wisconsin called La Crosse, and so that's one that we worry about here in the Midwest. And all three of them can lead to encephalitis. Now I say can, doesn't mean it will. As I say with most viruses, most patients are going to be asymptomatic or have a flu-like illness. But then you're going to have that subset of patients, typically over 55 or very young or immunocompromised, that wind up developing encephalitis. Okay, so first things first, structure. All of the Bunyaviridae, whether they have an arthropod or not, are a negative sense segmented RNA virus. Most of the Bunyaviruses, as I mentioned, are arboviruses, so particularly the three that we're talking about, California, Jamestown, and La Crosse in this video. So that means they're zoonoses, but actually all of the Bunyaviruses are zoonoses because they all have some association with rodents, squirrels, and mice. They have a very similar viremia and progression to the Flavy and Toga viruses that we talked about in host defense, host response. So they can kind of act very similarly to them. So your Flavy and Togas were things like chikungunya, dengue. Those are things that, you know, it kind of acts like. When you want to detect it, you're going to look basically in the blood, and you're going to do RT-PCR testing. And that's just going to tell you the viral mRNA in the blood or other specimens. A lot of times we'll see CSF used or urine used. The vector is the mosquito. So what actually happens in each of these viruses? So what I'm going to say actually calls for all three: California, Jamestown, and La Crosse. They're a widely distributed group. There's actually more than these three. There's actually 10 antigenically related viruses. And essentially what we see is this undifferentiated fever, right? Headache, mild to severe CNS involvement. When it's severe, we can see seizures, and that involvement is most often seen in children. So this is one of those things where little kids get it a lot harder than adults. La Crosse virus actually tends to be the most common and unfortunately the most severe. And so La Crosse, we certainly see that up here in Wisconsin, but you can see they're not incredibly common, right? So like in Chicago or in Illinois, we only saw one, but there were 175 cases of the California encephalitis group viruses in Ohio in between 2007 and 2016. So not incredibly common, but when we see them in children, can be very severe. 60% of the cases develop seizures, and about 1% of the cases resulted in death. And in 2016, we actually saw cases in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Ohio, West Virginia, and Tennessee. So this is another one of those that as we have mosquitoes that are living longer and in more places, thank you global warming, we can expect some of these arthropod-driven diseases to have a larger effect on human health. And unfortunately, there's no treatment for this one, no vaccine. All you can do is support the patient and hope their body fights it off.